The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening and welcome to Bronx Talk. Tonight's guest has authored a Bronx book that has been receiving significant acclaim. Barbara Walters said that it makes her wish she had been brought up in the Bronx. It's this book right here, Just Kids from the Bronx, which is very much like me and like most of you. It contains interviews with some of the last half-century's most famous and some not-so-famous Bronxites. The book is a delight to read, but more than that, for us, it provides a unique look and perspective into our hometown and its legacy. So we'll talk about the book with Arlene Alda, yes, the wife of award-winning actor Alan Alda, and we'll also take a call from one of the Bronxites who was interviewed for the book. You too can join us on the program if you want. Call in with questions or comments, 718-960-7261. You can also send an email to us at bronxtalk@bronxnet.org or post them on our Facebook page, and we'll read them on the air during a future edition of our program. For the here and now, a lot of people have been waiting for this. Please join me in welcoming to Bronx Talk the author of Just Kids from the Bronx, Arlene Alda. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Gary. Really glad to be here, back in the Bronx again.
That's it. For people who have not read it, and I don't know where they've been, it does say it right in the forward, but tell us how the book came about and how we got to this point where we have Just Kids from the Bronx.
Well, I met a guy, and it wasn't my husband. I met a guy.
We won't tell him.
About 5 years ago or so, maybe a little earlier. And we met casually at a dinner party, and I found out he was from the Bronx. Not only from the Bronx, but also from the same building I grew up in. And his name is Mickey Drexler, and he's CEO of J. Crew. So on a lark, we decided to go back to the building we both grew up in,
So
which we did.
That in and of itself is a Bronx story, because everywhere I go, I mean, if you leave town, you always run into somebody from the Bronx, or I'm a D. Clinton guy, so I run into somebody from Clinton.
Yep.
And so you went back to the neighborhood.
We went back to we went back to the neighborhood. We went back to the building, the Mayflower, where we both were brought up at different times. I'm 11 years older. Mickey was a toddler when I was off in high school. I didn't know him at the time. Okay, so we went back, and he was very animated, telling me about his childhood, and me the same way. And as that progressed, I thought, this is incredible. There's something so wonderful happening here. I know this guy from the surface, but I didn't know this guy from his childhood, where it really began. So, and I know there are a lot of interesting people, prominent people from the Bronx, and I thought it would be interesting to interview them and see where that led. So I interviewed a few people I knew. There was Regis Philbin, Martin Bregman, producer, Neil deGrasse Tyson, Mary Higgins Clark, and each one had a great story to tell. And so it spread from there to wanting to cover decades of people who lived
And then as you went through these conversations, it sounds to me like you said, wow, this is so interesting, or another aspect of life. And then you said, gee whiz, you know, I should write a book. Now, you have written books. You have done numerous children's books. You've been a photographer. Never really did like a real, I hate to put it this way, an adult book like this, right?
Well, I did 2 books for adults. texts that were more
Photographs, that's what I meant,
photo
yeah.
generated, because the text came from the photographs. The photographs are first. This book is words. It's talking, it's words, and the photographs are wonderful vintage photographs that each person of the 65 people gave in to be in front of their chapter.
Talk to me about how the interviews went. Like you say, well, I interviewed him. Let's say you interviewed Mary Higgins Clark, or even Regis, who it's clear in the book that he's a neighbor of yours. Had you ever talked about the Bronx with Regis before that point?
Okay, we knew that each one of us had come from the Bronx, but we didn't exchange stories in depth. It was more like surface. Oh, you lived over there. I know where that is, and but I didn't get into the real story of what his family was like. And it wasn't until we started talking when I was taking down with the tape recorder.
Well, this is what I wanted to get into. My original question was, so you sat down with a tape recorder,
Yeah.
And then you had somebody transcribe it, or you could always get them transcribed. Did you ask a lot of questions? Because the way the book reads is really, it's somebody just telling their story.
Conversation.
Did you interrupt like I do all the time? Did you interrupt a lot? Or did you have to, did the stories just go? Give me a sense of how some of those went.
The sense of it is, you have your finger on it. Yeah, it's pretty much right. I didn't, because I don't usually interview, I didn't have in my vocabulary, so to speak, a set of questions. I didn't know where to start except to say, hey, I'm from the Bronx too, kind of. Where did you grow up? What schools? Just to get into it. And gradually, through just talking for 45 minutes, sometimes an hour, sometimes a half hour, stories would emerge. But each time the person told me something, I listened pretty keenly. So I would ask questions that came up naturally from whatever the information was. In Regis's case, it was a little bit different. I knew he had a great story about what he wanted to be when he grew up, and he wanted to be Bing Crosby.
So did you understand what the book was going to be like at the beginning, or was it sounds to me like, we were talking about the nature of art before we went on the air, like any really good piece of art, it sounds like it just grew and you said, wait a minute, now this is what's going to be the book. Am I getting that right?
Yes, in this respect. I knew, after I spoke to Mickey and after the first few interviews, I knew there was a book. I knew there would be a book. But I didn't know where it would lead. I didn't know where these interviews would go, speaking in terms of narrative. I didn't know what they would lead to, nor did I know what they would mean ultimately. So I just plugged on. I just went on ahead and knew that this was a story that had to cover decades. It couldn't be my generation alone, because that's only one little part of the story.
As I was reading it, and in a way it came to me, and all I could think of was that old Walter Matthau movie, Plaza Suite, where it's like a set, and then there's different stories within the set. And in a way, the borough of the Bronx is the set, and everybody would tell their story. And because, this is my review of the book, folks, because the book is chronological, all of a sudden I realized, as I'm going through, wait a minute, I'm getting this story, a picture of the Bronx, or in the case of that movie, a picture of what the hotel was like.
Yeah.
I
mean, now, thank you.
I didn't ask a question, but that's what the book struck me as.
Yeah, thank you. That was deliberate. It was purposeful. As I said, if I just stuck to my generation or those around my age, it would be maybe a lovely story, but very limited, because the Bronx has gone through decades of evolution and change, and I wanted to find out who were the people that grew up then that succeeded? Because basically, these are all success stories.
Did you interview anybody on the phone or anything like that, or did you
Yes,
insist? You
yes,
did do some on the phone?
I did. Al Pacino was in California when I interviewed him, so we had a phone conversation. Colin Powell was in Washington when I interviewed him, so there was a phone conversation. Mary Higgins Clark was a phone conversation. But I think, and the book starts off with a posthumous piece by Abe Rosenthal, who was the great Times.
You know, it's funny when I opened it up and saw that was the first one.
Yeah.
I was like, how perfect, because here he is, you know, the longtime editor of the New York Times, leads off the story, but chronologically that
was
works
accurate.
as well.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to tell you my favorite anecdote of what came up in the book. We're going to take a short break and then we'll be back. More Bronx Talk. Arlene Alder. The book is Just Kids from the Bronx, which is me and you and everybody. And we'll be right back. I don't even bring notes. I just
No, you're terrific.
All right, back with you on Bronx Talk. Just Kids from the Bronx is the book. Now we're going to talk about some of the kids. I have to tell you, the image that I cannot get out of my mind is Colin Powell, and he starts off, and again, you have to be very careful when you read it. He enjoyed taking bottles and putting them on train tracks and pulverizing them. That's the word that he used. And then the image that I can't get out of my head is he and his friends would fly kites, and they tied razor blades to the strings, and they loved to knock each other out of the sky. What better metaphor for the guy who became the four-star general and you know, Secretary of State?
Actually, it was a very complicated thing. He didn't just have the glass pulverized. He'll take a soda bottle, had to put it in a tin can.
Yes.
And in those days, there were trolleys. So the tin can goes on the trolley tracks. Trolley comes, smashes the can. Inside is the pulverized glass. Then they have to glue that glass onto the strings, put razor blades on, and then play Shooting Down World War II.
That's what they were. I just couldn't stop laughing. This is Colin Powell. That was his upbringing in the Bronx. But there were many people like that. I mean, Al Pacino talked about going to the movies at the age of 4. Who knew, right? Robert Klein said he was the class clown. Carl Reiner discovered somehow that he could make people laugh. I could have written that book for you.
But it's how he made people laugh.
Well, of course. We're going to be joined by one of the people interviewed in the book in a second. Two stories I want to relate. One is the fact that Chaz Palminteri actually saw a murder, which is what became of the foundation of the Bronx Tale.
Yeah.
Remarkable.
Yeah. He lived in the Belmont section, Arthur Avenue, and he was a kid, 10, 11, 12 years old, sitting on the stoop with his head in his hand, you know, just kind of looking around. And he saw two cars vying for parking space. What he thought was, trying to get into a parking space. One guy gets out, and before he knows it, he hears shots. His father is grabbing him upstairs. His mother is crying. The police are coming.
This is. I could have told you the story. It's right out of the movie.
Yeah, he did a great job. That film is great, by the way, and he's a great actor.
Listen, you're preaching to the choir here in the borough of the Bronx. We're going to bring Rick Meyerowitz on in 1 second, but I just wanted to mention it was so fascinating that Regis Philbin's devotion to Bing Crosby. Folks, if you didn't know it, you should read the book, because Just Kids from the Bronx will tell you that this was Regis's inspiration, and it makes sense, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, actually, most kids have idols or heroes, you know, and it could be a baseball player, a rock star, a movie star, a teacher, anyone. For Regis, it was hearing Bing Crosby on the radio. And, you know, he was an only child, so at least until he was 18 or 19, so he was out of the house. But when he was a little kid, listening to those songs on the radio with Crosby singing meant something to him. And the lyrics meant something to him. And the movies that Crosby did meant something.
What I loved in reading about the book, and I think what makes it so wonderful, is then you know what you know about Regis Philbin right now, and it all ties together. Yeah. Let's bring on Rick Meyerowitz. Rick, who's a well-known illustrator. I would say he was the illustrator of National Lampoon, but he really was National Lampoon if you look at what it ultimately became. Rick, how are you?
I'm good. Happy to speak with you.
Great, thank you.
Hi, Arlene.
Hi, Rick. Good to hear you.
By the way, they're both going to be at the Bronx Museum this Saturday. Rick, you told me it was 1 o'clock, right?
I think it's noon.
Noon?
It's noon. No,
noon.
I didn't say 1. Right. It's noon.
Well, I was going on Central
And
time.
you know, Gary, I was listening to you talk about Colin Powell, which was an incredible thing in the book.
Yeah.
And the kites with the razor blades and the broken glass and everything else. We just had spitballs in our end of the Bronx.
Yeah, you hollowed out a big pen, right?
Yeah, nothing, just spitballs. So
I have to ask you...
Probably why I never became a general.
Well, there probably are some other reasons as well. All you got to do is read the National Lampoon, or the former National Lampoon. Did that ball, that Spalding, really go through both windows of that bus? Now, what the book has a story that Rick was playing stickball and he hit the ball through.
I can't tell you if it was a number 3 bus, which it says in the book. I read the book, Arlene, and it said a number 3 bus. And I thought, did I say number 3? Oh. How would I know?
Let's let
I know
I took it down.
Because it was in Morrison Avenue, just off Westchester, and the bus was headed to Classen Points. I had a line drive. It went into the bus, and I almost fell to the ground. I could not believe I just killed somebody.
It was a moving bus, right?
The bus was moving.
Well, the most important thing is...
And I see the ball bouncing on the sidewalk across the street, and I thought, saved. Saved.
Right. I mean, the people in the bus must have wondered what the heck was that.
I wondered if anyone looked up from their newspaper and noticed the ball going by.
I can only tell you, when I read that, as myself, somebody growing up in the Bronx, I once hit a ball right through somebody's window on the 4th floor on Gouverneur Avenue, and so I can relate, although it was not a moving window, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
What I love...
Is that when you discovered how fast you could run?
Just about.
Good comment.
Let me ask you this, because we've been tracing back some well-known people and their origins. Did you learn drawing, or what in the Bronx helped you become who you actually became and what you actually did as your profession?
I loved my childhood in the Bronx. The Bronx was a wonderful place to grow up. It nurtured my childhood. It nurtured that of my brothers, my friends, and millions of other people growing up in the Bronx loved it. Not everybody grows up in the Bronx and instantly moves away. There's a real feeling, there was a real feeling, I believe there is today, of neighborhood. And the neighborhoods were really special. So many friends of different kinds.
And by the way, get back to my question. Did it help? Did it help? Was it a conditioner for you to become, kind of this offbeat illustrator who was a really important part of, a very irreverent...
Gary, I never thought of myself as offbeat until now, but I'm going to take that with me from the show. I
That's a lie, by the way. He knows.
What I loved is that I got the idea that creativity was really important. growing up in my family, creativity was important. Everybody wanted to draw. Everybody wanted to write. Everybody wanted to take pictures. There was a real sense that it was honored and encouraged. And after we lived on Morrison Avenue,
Right.
we moved over to Pelham Parkway North.
Right.
And
Arlene just wanted to, Rick, hang on. Arlene, you wanted to add something?
Just one little thing. I would imagine, Rick, that in the schools at that time, you were encouraged in your art. Or am I extrapolating too much?
I wasn't discouraged in my art. I was encouraged in my art, Arlene, but not in my notebooks during science class.
And I'm going to pick up, because we deal with this stuff on our show all the time. This is a very central political point that Ms. Alda has very carefully laid out for us, the importance of art and creativity. Rick, before I let you go, I want to understand from your perspective similarities or differences in the Bronx between the time that you grew up. Now, when did you grow up in the Bronx?
I grew up in I was born in 1943.
Okay.
So you could say the 50s.
Similarities between what you see in the Bronx now and then, or differences? Anything you want to comment? Just give us an overall.
Yeah, I want to tell you what's the same. What's the same is the vastness of the ethnic groups that are there, the different kinds of people that are there. That when you get that many people of so many different kind of ethnicities that come together, what you get from that is creativity. What you get from that is energy. This is why places like Kansas have no energy.
I don't want to cut down anybody else's hometown.
What we love about New York, what we love about a place like the Bronx, is we honor the immigrant. We honor the people from different places. And we live with them, we work with them, and that is really a special part about the Bronx, and that's what it still has. When I was a kid, every single person that I knew, every adult I knew in the Bronx had an accent. There was post-World War II. They were from a different place. Everybody was from someplace else, and they had incredible accents. And they still have those accents, but they're different now. They're different accents from different places.
We're going to let you go. You enjoyed being interviewed by Arlene Alda?
Loved it. I'm honored to be in this book with Colin Powell and Chaz Tamateri. I'm a little concerned about Chaz. He'll come over and break my knuckles or something like that. But
maybe not.
I love being in the book with him. I love, Al Pacino and Mary Higgins Clark and all these incredible people that are in the book.
And real quick, and then Rick, we're going to promote Rick's got a movie or something.
I was going to say that Rick's story is a phenomenal story. And he uses language. For an artist, he has an incredible command of words.
Rick, there's a movie or something opening or something? What do you got?
Yeah, there's a movie called Drunk, Stoned, Brilliant, Dead. The story of the National Lampoon. It's going to be at the Tribeca Film Festival next month. Only 3 showings, but it'll open theaters in the fall.
Great.
It's based on the book I did a couple of years ago.
Great. Rick, thanks so much.
Thanks, Rick.
A great pleasure. Arlene, see you soon.
See you very soon, Rick.
As soon as
Thank
Saturday.
you.
So long. Bye-bye.
I want to talk about music now. Valerie Simpson, of course, again, what a surprise. She started to play the piano by ear at the age of 5. There was a piano in our house, and she had no idea, nobody else knew how to play it, and she sat down and started playing. Who knew? And then she got to play, instead of classes, she would, break the rules. You were a clarinetist.
Yeah.
Tell me about your apartment and playing the clarinet.
Okay. My apartment, our apartment, my family. There was my mother, my father, my sister, my brother, myself, and our dog. And we had 1 bedroom. At the time, it didn't impact me so much until I recognized that I didn't have a space of my own, like a place to just be alone and quiet. And my mother had a sewing machine in the dinette, and that sewing machine drove me nuts. And as luck would have it, she was a really nice person. So the fact that I used to argue with her about the noise of the sewing machine or about the clothing that I wanted to buy instead of having made by her, she didn't take it personally. And when I started playing the clarinet in high school And certainly the clarinet was much noisier than the sewing machine. She never complained. So, I mean, how lucky am I?
There's a section, and we really actually, unfortunately, running out of time, by somebody who's anonymous because the person was abused, and it is unfortunately part of the story we have to tell.
Yes, I felt that was a very important thing
Had you
to tell.
anticipated it when you interviewed that person?
No, not at all. Not at all. As a matter of fact, I know the person, didn't know, I knew some stories of her childhood, and they were of quite a different nature. And as she started to talk to me, and I started asking questions, well, you were a loner. All the kids I knew were in groups of kids. Why were you a loner? And then she came up with
it. And I remember reading it, and I was saying, well, why is this person anonymous? And then, of course, as you read it, and had you wrestled, we're almost out of time, had you wrestled with yourself about including that in the book?
No, never.
And you just said you would make it anonymous? It is part of the story.
Yes.
Last thing I have to ask you, again, the book is Just Kids from the BX, and you got to check it out. It's a lot of fun. It's about who we are. It's about who we were. Maybe if you think about it, maybe who we will be. What did you learn about the Bronx? Has it changed as writing it and this experience, changed your impression of your hometown?
Well, you know, in retrospect, there's always a different view than when you were in the middle of it. Growing up, there was a sense of this was great, but now the bigger world beckons. Now I come back and I say, boy, this is a great place.
There you go.
This is a great place.
It is a great place, and it's a wonderful book. Again, the book is Just Kids from the Bronx. Arlene Alder, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for doing it, and onward and upward.
Thank
folks
you.
Available, obviously, wherever books are sold.
Yeah.
I'm going to have Arlene autograph my copy, which, if you download it and read it on your Nook and all that stuff, you can't have her autograph it. So you can pick up the book. Anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you, Gary.
Folks,
real pleasure.
If you have further questions or comments on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, then email them to us at bronxtalk@bronxnet.org or put them on our Facebook page, and we'll read those on the air during a future edition of our program. Please like the Bronx Talk Facebook page, and you can check out our archives at bronxnet.org. You'll find Bronx Talk on the lower right navigation bar. Now, next week, we're going to do something we have never done, and that is to do our third show in a short period of time about one specific project. We will have the district managers of Community Boards 5 and 4 on the show to talk about the proposed renovation of Jerome Avenue, the Jerome Avenue study. That'll be our third show on this topic. Very important, and that's why we're taking the time to do it. Next Monday night here on Bronx Talk. Thanks to producer Dahlia, to director Shirley, the cast of thousands, and we'll see you next week.